let's go over bed making in the resident environment. In other words, the resident's home, right? And long-term care. So, I've mentioned this before, you probably hear me say it 100 times, that we should be treating long-term care as if it is the person's home, because it is. We are a guest in their home, and we should treat everything in their room as if we are a guest and conduct ourselves as visitors. That's why we're knocking, asking to enter, asking permission before we do things, because you wouldn't just barge into someone's home and start messing with their stuff. And I always like to think too, when somebody is in long-term care, they don't have a lot of possessions in that room with them. So the things that are in there are really important to that person, and you should really treat it carefully. Some things that you'll find in the person's room, the bed. The bed is the biggest part of the room, and you want it to look nice. That's why we spend such a long time talking about bed making, because it's the most important part of the room. It's the first thing you see when you walk in. It needs to look nice. They'll have a trash can. They'll have a closet that contains their personal clothing, which should be labeled with their name. They're going to have an over-bed table, a call bell. One of the first things that you should know when you walk into a facility, one of the first things you should learn or ask about is how their call bell system works. Some of them, they just have a light that flashes outside the room. Some of them have an answering service thing that's at the nurse's station. So you need to find out how that all works and how to cancel a call bell. There will be a privacy curtain, because with every single skill, as you know by now, you need to provide privacy. That is their right. There will be a bedside table, which is different than the over bed table because it's just sitting next to the bed. They'll have all their own bathroom supplies, which should be labeled with their name. If it's not got their name on it and they have a roommate, then you shouldn't be using that, right? You shouldn't go in the bathroom and just use any old toothbrush that's sitting in there, because it might be their roommates, and that's gross when you think about it. Even the basin should have their name on it, because even though we wash these out, there still could be some residue in there, and I'm sure that resident doesn't want to share a basin with their roommate. So one of the things that's important to keep with you in your pocket when you're wearing your scrubs is a Sharpie. So if you need to run and gather supplies from the clean supply room, make sure that you put that resident's name on there. So they'll have their own basin, whether it's a big basin or an emesis basin, it should have their name on it. If they're a male, they may have a urinal, which men use for urinating. They don't use it to poop, right? That would be for a bedpan. And they may have a bedpan, which is usually kept in the bedside table in a plastic bag in the bottom shelf. And if they are somewhat mobile, but they're not able to walk all the way to the bathroom, then they may have a bedside commode that's sitting next to the bed. It'll have a little bucket underneath that you slide out, and you take it to the bathroom, dump it, clean it, rinse it, and put it back. Please make sure that you put that bucket back, or you're going to have a big mess to clean up one day. Your role as a CNA, is to provide for all the activities of daily living for your resident, but it's also to make sure that you're being helpful. So maintaining the cleanliness of that person's room. Be careful not to just go out there and clean it the way that you want to, throwing all their personal stuff away if it looks like junk to you. You need to ask permission before you do stuff like that. So things like cards, notes, you don't need to touch those things without asking. Make sure that you that there's no odor in the room. I'm sure everyone's walked into a long-term care facility, nursing home, and just smelled that urine smell. That is not necessary, right? That means that somebody is not providing good odor control, because you don't walk into someone's home necessarily and smell that heavy ammonia smell. We need to make sure that the place is clean, it smells nice, because nobody wants to live in a place like that. So if there is a urinal, empty it. If there is a bedside commode, empty it. If there's a brief and a trash can, take it out with you when you leave the room. Don't leave it sitting inside somebody's trash can to make the whole room smell bad. Get rid of that odor as quickly as possible. And if you walk into a room and you smell feces or urine, then you need to check your resident to make sure that they're clean. Noise control is an important thing that we don't think about, especially if you're working night shift. I've found on night shift that people don't seem to have any respect for the fact that it's nighttime and people are sleeping. They are so loud, especially at the nurse's station, just laughing and joking around at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's rude. You need to be quiet. Okay? If you're in the hallway, be quiet. There's no reason to be yelling and laughing real loud. There's an appropriate time for everything, and that's not the appropriate time. So be aware of how loud you're being, and make sure that you're not being too noisy, because some residents, they might not want to tell you, hey, I can't sleep because you're being so loud. You need to have some self-awareness. Lighting and temperature is important. You'll find that a lot of these long-term care facilities are on the warmer side, and that's because these elderly people can't always maintain that body temperature. They're always very cold. So they'll be warm, and you want to make sure there's enough light to keep the person safe. So we do turn the lights down at night, but not all the lights, not completely pitch black where they're going to fall if they get up, right? There might be some low lights, a night light somewhere, but we don't want it so bright that the person can't rest. So bed making is huge. You can always tell the quality of a nurse by the type of bed they make, I think. So this is something to practice. This is something that you can practice in your home. You don't have to come to campus for that. So watch the occupied bed making video and also just practice making a bed without a person in it, so that you can get those nice little hospital corners down, make everything look neat and pretty. Okay, this is to promote comfort, because there's nothing like getting into a nice freshly made bed, right? Also reduces infection and skin breakdown. If the sheets are wet, they need to be changed. If they're dirty, if they've got crumbs and food particles in them, they need to be changed. And it just looks nice, right? Like I said, it's the biggest thing in the room. When you walk in the room, you want to make sure it looks nice. Every place kind of has its own schedule for how often sheets need to be changed. A lot of places that I've been to, if it's the person's shower day, that's usually the day that we're also changing their sheets. So you're going to want to find that out. It's usually twice a week or 3 times a week. We don't want to be changing all the sheets every single day, because that can become really expensive for laundry for that facility. I mean, they spend an enormous amount of money cleaning sheets. So some important rules with linens. You're always going to try to collect them in the order that you're going to be using them. Okay, so practice that. You don't want to place them down on your clean surface and then have to move them all around looking for what you need, and then you're dropping stuff on the floor. It just makes sense to gather them in the order that you're going to be using them in. Hold them away from your uniform, right, because you never know what's on your uniform. We don't shake things. We don't shake our hands. We don't shake linens. Only take what you need. Don't be one of those linen hoarders, so that next time somebody goes into the linen closet, everything's gone because so-and-so was here first. Nobody likes that person. So don't be that person. Don't hoard the linens. Only get what you need and leave everything else there for somebody else. Okay, and if you accidentally bring something into a room that you didn't mean to, or that you didn't end up needing, you can't leave it in the room, because now you've taken it out of circulation. You need to put it in the dirty linen hamper. Okay, you can't put it back on the shelf, because now it's been contaminated because it's been in someone else's room, and that's how we spread disease. So if you took it into a room, you didn't use it, take it back out and put it in the dirty linen hamper, which is another reason not to be grabbing a whole bunch of linens. Okay. You always roll the dirty stuff away from you onto itself and put it in the dirty linen hamper. And you'll see, I think I mentioned it in a couple of my videos, that one of my pet peeves is if there is a dirty linen hamper and it's got a foot pedal, use the foot pedal. Don't put your disgusting hands all over the top of that linen hamper for somebody else to then come and touch. That's how we spread disease. Right now we're in a global pandemic, so we don't need to be spreading anything else. So be aware of yourself. Last thing is these 3 different types of beds you see here. An open bed means that the linens are folded down. They're either all folded down or fan folded. And this just makes it real easy for the person to walk into the room, sit down on their bed, and pull their sheets up and take a nap. Surgical bed, a closed bed is when the sheets are pulled all the way to the top, Often this is a room that's not occupied, meaning there's nobody in this room. I can put admission in that room, and a lot of times the bed will be in the highest position, so we don't want anybody getting into that bed. And then a surgical bed, everything is to the side so that we can put a stretcher right here and then pull the person over and then just cover them up. One real important thing when you're making a bed that is not occupied, if it's an open bed, then you need to make sure that that bed is in the lowest position, right? I don't want anybody trying to hop up into that bed and breaking their hip, falling on the ground while they're trying to get up in their bed. So you raise the bed for your back while you're making it. Once it's finished, you lower it again. So definitely a skill to practice more than once. You can do this at home. Make sure you watch the video on occupied bed making.